Welcome everybody to the 3 o'clock Eastern session. I can see that a few more folks are starting to climb into the meeting. So we'll give it one more moment and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank everybody for coming to the session today. I'm going to go ahead and publish a quick poll, just as kind of an icebreaker. So I'll push this out to everybody now. And the question is, have you ever used an outsourcing partner before? And so, again, I'll monitor this periodically, but if you can please vote as you're joining into the session, that would be great. Everything is anonymous here, so I don't necessarily know your answers, but at least it'll give me a sense of what we're working with here today. And then in terms of just housekeeping notes, feel free to ask questions throughout the session. I'll be manning the Q&A box here. Certainly, if you have questions that are more specific to IMS Group, which is who I'm with, I'm more than happy to have you come by the booth, post the meeting, and answer any specific questions you have. So if you could please share some questions that are more about general outsourcing best practices or questions that you might have. But again, thank you all for joining the session today. We're calling this Best Practices to Make Your Outsourcing Partnership a Game Changer. And while I know that outsourcing isn't necessarily as sexy as a topic as maybe technology, automation, and some other things that are wonderful topics and very impactful to the staffing industry and your businesses, I'm sure. But I happen to think, and I'm slightly biased, that outsourcing can be an absolute game changer to your staffing business. And I'm somebody that is the story, that's proof of that. So again, excited to go through what I believe are just some best practices from my own experience, but also certainly what we see with IMS's customers throughout the globe. So moving on, as you can see, this was a photo of me from many moons ago, but I'm Brian Tweed. I serve as the Senior Vice President of Sales and Key Accounts for IMS Group. I have over 15 years of experience in the staffing industry, and I was one of these strange, odd people that always wanted to be a recruiter and didn't know exactly what I was getting myself into in 2006 when I got into the industry. But I've held roles anywhere from being an executive recruiter, a regional recruiting manager, a national account manager over large enterprise accounts. And for the last 8 years, I've been significantly involved with outsourcing partners. And so hopefully I provide a shed of credibility in this meeting and that I've been across the aisle in your shoes. As I was an outsourcing buyer of 6 years at multiple organizations. I was the director of alternative delivery and channel partnership at Volt Workforce Solutions, a large global staffing firm, as well as a Chicagoland smaller IT boutique IT staffing firm called CyberSearch before I joined IMS in the spring of 2020. So, again, I've had the trepidations and uncertainty many years ago about engaging an outsourcing partner, but I've found that, again, it can be a very fruitful experience, one that's really shaped my career. And while not everyone's going to actually become the sales leader for an outsourcing organization, the goal here is to really utilize some of these best practices and tools to get a lot more return on your investment in an outsourcing partnership. My background obviously lends itself to more of a delivery perspective. And so my role is to really engage our staffing clients, obviously from a sales standpoint, but continue that relationship thereafter and ensure that you all don't hit the landmines and some of those bombs that may come along the way. So as we go back to the screen here, my apologies. Moving on, just a little bit about IMS, kind of the initial shameless plug, and then we'll dive into the presentation. IMS is a large global outsourcing organization that's headquartered in Ahmedabad, India. We have multiple delivery centers throughout the globe, 2 in India, 1 in Ahmedabad, obviously our headquarters, and then another location in Jaipur, fairly close to Noida. We've got over 1,950 folks that actually reside in India that are either billable or support staff and leadership for IMS in our global recruitment and back office outsourcing operations. And then we just opened up last spring a location in Manila in the Philippines. We provide outsourcing services across the staffing spectrum. That is our sole and primary buyer of our services and a client target of ours. People Possible is our flagship recruitment process outsourcing entity. But as you can see, we also have outsourced accounting support within our IMS Decimal brand, as well as branded talent community and direct sourcing solutions for the MSP market, and our outsourced property preservation group called IMS DataWise. And ultimately, what I want you to all to take what are the best practices from an outsourcing engagement. But certainly, if you have interest in our services, come on by the booth after this meeting and can talk shop and discuss how we could potentially support your needs. But outside of IMS, there's many great outsourcing organizations that I strongly recommend that you partner with and evaluate as you're looking to continue to grow your staffing business. So to get to the meat of the presentation, how can your staffing business become a game changer? And I think right now we're all experiencing the visual here of an anchor of all these requisitions and the supply and demand challenge of recruiting and talent that we're seeing right now in this global economic landscape, where we had this huge kind of confluence of the global pandemic and then this huge resurgence of talent needs. But the talent networks that we're working with don't have a lot of the skills or are becoming increasingly more expensive to employ. And so there's all of these factors that are impacting, I know, your staffing businesses, day in and day out, and it's only accelerating as we get into 2022. And so I understand that burden that you're probably all feeling. And I think, again, outsourcing could be a way to mitigate some of those challenges and also help you pivot with the increasing evolving staffing world. But first and foremost, I know I see here in the polls here that many of you have already engaged in outsourcing and are using a partner, which is great. But for those that haven't outsourced or maybe not had as positive an experience in the past, certainly cost savings is a big reason and a value proposition. I think that's inherent from an outsourcing standpoint. But I think, why do I hear that staffing businesses engage with IMS or other outsourcers? And obviously it's to your bottom line. It could be that you're looking to bolster up your accounting and ultimately sell the business, right? Becoming more profitable and financially solvent for a sale. It could be that you have an overload of client requisitions that you can't support, or that you're spending too much money in supporting right now with your existing recruitment or support staff. And now how can you transition that to an outsourcing group that can allow your local staff to focus on true driving relationships with your clients and improving their productivity? Again, I think what's incredible about the recruiting industry and that recruiting function is that nearly 60% of what recruiters do is actually not engaging directly with candidates or actually performing revenue producing functions. And so outsourcing could be a great way to really maximize the time that your recruiting staff and sales staff are engaging with your clients, engaging with candidates. But then in the background, that work is still getting done. And so it's really refocusing those core activities for your business. So again, I'm not here to say, I'll replace your local recruiters with outsourced offshore recruiters. It's more about reallocating that spend and that function to make your business more profitable and really purposeful and focused. And I see it as a competitive advantage. When I was on more of the sales and recruiting side, working for the staffing company, I always felt that I had 1,000 recruiters in my back pocket. So I didn't have to say no to opportunities that came across our way that maybe I wasn't going to get the adoption from local recruiters to support, or maybe the dollars didn't make sense for us to engage. But I utilized an outsourcing partner or partners to then be able to navigate that and leverage them for business that wasn't either core to what we do or didn't make sense for our local teams to support. And so to me, that's a real advantage if you're a salesperson attending this meeting about what you can take to market, knowing that you've got a partner in an IMS or others that can help you really grow and sustain and support your business, no matter the type of opportunity that comes your way. And then lastly, when I ask C-level staffing executives about why they outsource or where they see the value, at first I would think it would be that cost savings or some of that profitability. But particularly right now in this recruiting landscape, it is that agility, the ability to bob and weave and be able to scale up or down your recruiting or your back office teams as your demand increases or diminishes over time. If you have a huge project that you need to scale up, you don't have the time, to afford to take 8 months to bring in a group of recruiters, get them trimmed up and ready to be profitable. Whereas an outsourcing partner could potentially do that in 8 days. And so again, that ability to sustain growth, to have a partner in your back pocket to really help continue to cultivate your recruiting teams without you having to really invest that much from a training and hiring perspective. You can focus on your core business and driving relationships with your clients, while an outsourcing partner can be that recruiting and back office engine that really helps your business continue to churn as you grow along the way. And so, assuming that you'd want to move forward with outsourcing, and many of you already do, it's not necessarily if you outsource, but it's who, right? And obviously I'm biased from an IMS standpoint, but I've leveraged several outsourcing providers along the way in my career, and they all have their positives and weaknesses, and IMS is no different. And so it's really about who's the right partner for you. And so as you're going through the selection process, I strongly encourage you all to interview 3 to 5 different providers in different markets or locations to really have a good comfort and understanding that you're bringing on the right partner. And as I say here in the presentation, selecting the right partners, it may seem counterintuitive, but I actually encourage you all to select multiple partners as you're starting or continuing that evolution of an outsourcing partnership for your business. One is that you don't necessarily want to have all your eggs in that one basket in the instance that there's a significant, earth-shattering type of typhoon or outbreak. Obviously this pandemic has taught us a lot about having contingency plans. And so, having multiple vendors and partners that you can work with certainly alleviates a lot of your risk and mitigates some of those challenges along the way. But secondly, again, not every partner is the best at everything else. And so if you support multiple lines of business, it certainly makes sense to have multiple partners that specialize so that you get really the best of all those worlds and optimize your performance and partnership. I think what you want to obviously understand is, what do you expect from the partnership? What does that return on investment look like? If your recruiters are at X percentage of ROI now, where do you need an outsourcing recruiting or partnership to be for it to make sense for your business? Secondly, what is the outsource provider's leadership structure? Where are they based out of? Do they have a support mechanism? They have a QA team. What is their infrastructure like from a technology standpoint? All those factors come into play. And so it's not just about the recruiting output, it's also some of the safeguards and the leadership support in the background that's going to really determine if a partner is going to be successful for you or not. What geographies do they support? Again, IMS primarily supports US and Canada, as well as the UK and APAC, but we certainly don't have presence in some markets. And so I think it's really understanding how many recruiters, what percentage of resources support certain markets, how long they've been doing so, what industry markets that they specialize in. All those factors are going to be critical as you're vetting. It's not just sometimes about the cost. It's what that expertise, geographical exposure and experience is going to really drive that ROI for you. Lastly, how do they manage performance? Are there certain triggers in terms of performance improvement plans, or certain SLA or KPI expectations that they can expect? And if someone is absent or not meeting those expectations, how can you partner together to alleviate that and either coach somebody up or coach somebody out? And I mentioned data security. It's becoming increasingly more of a challenge, as you'll likely learn throughout this week at the World Staffing Summit, is just how important having your data secure is, and what measure certifications do those outsourcing businesses have. Certainly those like IMS, they're a little bit larger in scale and have significant business across the globe. We have really strong data security certifications and protocols that we put in place. And many other outsourcing firms do as well. So make sure that you're asking that as you're going through the selection process. And then lastly, just like we've seen over the last 6 to 12 months with the recruiting landscape, increasing significantly in the demand, being at a high peak that I've ever seen over the last 16 years. What is an outsourcing partner's ability to scale? How do they train? How do they cultivate the relationship? What does their management structure look like as you increase your investment in number of resources? So all those factors come into play as you evaluate. And so I don't encourage you to just simply select a provider based on the cost. Certainly understand how they can support your business and where their strengths and weaknesses are. And if you have a partner that says they can do everything and that they have no weaknesses, I would maybe take a step back and make sure that you're not getting wooed by a partner that isn't being honest about themselves and being transparent about what their specialties or niches are. And then to me, the critical nature of an outsourcing partnership is that first 90-day experience. And I usually work with our clients on a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And I developed this slide actually when I first joined IMS, and I like alliteration. So, to me, it really comes down to the 3 C's of a successful implementation, and that's having clarity, commitment, and consistency, not only from the outsourcing provider, but certainly from the staffing firm. And you may be thinking, well, Brian, that sounds like a lot of work. Why am I outsourcing if it's going to take all this work? And it's like, well, because when you do it and you do it well, you can have 800, 900, 1,000% ROI with a lot of the resources, but it does take a lot of engagement and collaboration in those first 90 days to really set the partnership off on the right runway. First, you need to understand and align with your partner what your purpose of the partnership is. If it's just to save money, I'd question a little bit about what those intentions are. But if you're looking to have a cost savings and then reallocate that to maybe build up your technology stack or to hire more salespeople, whatever it is, I think it's important for you to acknowledge what those pain points are and really what you're looking to get out of the partnership. And the more that you and your outsourcing providers understand that, then you can start to really map out goals and milestones and expectations to then truly evaluate if you are getting an ROI on that partnership. Secondly, establishing that key stakeholder. To me, that's a minimum barrier to entry. If I feel, and I've been an executive stakeholder in the past, that if I don't feel that we have buy-in or a true adoption of this type of partnership, doesn't matter what else you do. It's really primed for failure at that point. And so doesn't mean that this key stakeholder or executive in your staffing firm is going to be the person managing it day to day, but somebody that's championing the initiative, that is going to work to get buy-in internally with their staff and constituents. They're going to be really tactically working with the outsourcing provider day in and day out, and someone that ultimately is likely signing the checks for the partnership and is an escalation point in the partnership if need be. And something you're going to hear throughout this presentation is collaboration often. Outsourcing is not a scenario where you give someone the keys to an MSP or VMS or a client and say, okay, we'll touch base in 30 days and see how it's going. This is really that time you think of when a baby's first born, right? And having that initial touch point and that engagement and scheduling and really overemphasizing that communication, perhaps sometimes to a fault, is going to be critical to strengthening that relationship long term. I believe that there does need to be some type of dedicated in-house champion that is managing the relationship day to day. Typically a peer of like our operations process managers that we have at an IMS, and similar our competitors have those folks as well. So again, not necessarily just several recruiters that are managing the partnership, or recruiters or resources, account managers that are managing individual people. But it's always, I think, good to have a centralized orbit that the outsourcing partnerships kind of funnels around, so that there's a consistent message to what the outsourcing provider and those recruiters or resources are hearing. And again, there's someone accountable for that. Certainly you want to be realistic, right? And to me, that's where I typically put my hand up with potential prospects or our clients, that if you expect results in 3 weeks after a partnership and a significant ROI there, then I didn't do my job of setting the right expectations. It typically takes 3 to 6 months for a partnership like this to really get off the ground and seeing significant profitability. And that's really no different than what you would expect from a staff member that you would hire locally in the States and in Canada, wherever you may be sitting. And so, again, these types of partnerships take a little bit of time. There's a little bit of jockeying and kind of understanding where everybody is going to play within that partnership. And I think it's also understanding that particularly outsourced recruiters and resources in India, Manila, and across the globe are likely not going to have the same skill sets and performance capabilities of your local recruiters. And that's also why they typically come at a significant cost basis different. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't expect them to perform and continue to grow and prosper and develop really good skills overall. But again, level setting that and understanding that there's a reason why certain clients, certain accounts are going to be more appropriate for an outsourcing type of initiative rather than one of your local headhunters or recruiters. One thing that's really important, again, is developing what that project scope looks like, having a true implementation plan that you can methodically work through with your outsourcing partner to ensure that everyone's turned their keys in terms of setting up the partnership, who has access, is email set up, what are the standard operating procedures, are templates created, what is going to be that communicating cadence that we have. All those things are going to be important to really map out, put it on paper. Instead of communicating it just in a Slack or a Teams or in a SMS text, put it on paper, get everybody to review it, sign off on it together, and actually make it part of your contract. And I think the more that you can solidify what that scope is, what the expectations are for the partnership, everybody's aware, and then there's a lot less potential finger pointing or challenges down the road. Creating opportunities to integrate, I think, is going to be really key. And IMS, I'm sure like many others, we don't require technology integration necessarily in that sense, but I always believed when I was managing outsourcing teams that I wanted them to have the same experience as a recruiter within a Volt or a cyber search or wherever, and have them feel like they were sitting right next to me in my trainings, or I was managing them just like any other recruiter. They just happen to be half a world away. And a lot of that comes through the integration from a technology stack and process standpoint. While IMS can certainly develop and customize a solution outside of your existing process, you've already trained all your staff to have a certain recruiting workflow. Why reinvent the wheel when you already have two hands on it? And so again, the more that outsourcing firms can integrate into your existing processes, take the training and learnings that you've already developed, that branding, that candidate and client experience that you've worked so hard to create all these years, by them learning that, it's really going to, one, strengthen their understanding and knowledge of your company, but you're also your clients. And then your customers and your candidates are going to have the same type of quality experience no matter who's reaching out to them. And then finally, stick to the plan. If things don't work for the first couple of weeks, don't change course too quickly. Sometimes outsourcing partnerships can be a little hasty. And so I would encourage you to stick to the plan, don't deviate from it, and trust the process, as they would say. And really evaluate probably after every 90 days or so of what the status of the partnership is. And if there does need to be any course correction, it's done so based on data, feedback, and having a unified what we call alignment, from both the staffing client as well as the outsourcing provider. So those are just general best practices for those first 90 days in an implementation, what I call the hypercare. But even going beyond that, I think there's really 5 things that if there's takeaways from today's meeting that I want to continue to reinforce about an outsourcing partnership. And one is to really embrace that constant communication cadence, right? Establishing daily, weekly, and monthly goals, and really meet and develop a plan towards those each and every day, every week, and every month. So, for example, when I've managed outsourcing teams in the past, I had a daily stand-up call, both with our internal local staff as well as the outsourcing group. They were integrated together, and we would talk about priorities and what to focus on and where we were challenging, get the feedback from all the recruiters, and share best practices. If you're already doing that, I would encourage you just simply to integrate the outsourcing teams as it makes sense for that. But establishing weekly goals and monthly expectations for the group, and then start to really chart each and every one of those meetings to where you stand. I think it's important to have a meeting of the minutes, having somebody either at the outsourcing group or somebody within your staffing group, take stock, take down notes, and actually push that out to all the main stakeholders so that everybody knows what the status of the partnership is, what's working, what's not. And all of that's built around having a continuous communication throughout the partnership. And I joked a little bit about Slack and Microsoft Teams and Zoom and others that again, one of the great things, if there are, about this pandemic has been that we've become much more comfortable about engaging on these various technology work streams. And I only encourage you to integrate your outsourcing team into that. It makes that ease of communication very quick. You can streamline it, and you're not necessarily waiting on that phone tag game or email to manage a lot of those very tactical, quick-hitting things part of your business. And that's where I think the outsourcing teams can be really impactful. Lastly, again, really empowering those internal outsourcing teams to have specific scheduled touch points. A lot of times when we're seeing challenges between a staffing client and an outsourcing provider is that there's just not a lot of that direct communication. There's expectations along the way that weren't communicated or just not followed up on a continuous basis. And so I'll just say, well, okay, well, do you have a specific time every week that you've got dedicated to call that account manager or to call that recruiter? And if the answer is no, then that's really the first step in repairing some of that relationship and building trust. And again, I think the wonderful thing about having that constant communication is that you do have the ability to engage that global workforce. At IMS, not everybody's working in a traditional 9-to-5 schedule, but if you can stagger shifts and you can engage a multiple country workforce to your benefit, I think it gives you a lot of freedom for your business. So again, communicate, and communicate as best you can. Next is, again, utilizing more of an insourcing mindset. I talked about how developing and growing a relationship with an outsourcing provider is hard, and that's because it is. But I think the more that you feel them as not even just an extension of your business, but that they are your business. Again, most outsourcing providers are branding you in the market as your business. They are speaking on behalf of your business to candidates and potentially even clients and those that are going to be telling 10 of their friends that they have a good or bad experience. And so, which, again, that's why that implementation phase is so critical. But investing in process training and team building from Jump Street is so critical. As we talked about, integrating that outsourcing team with your internal technology, if possible, is critical. And then, the goal of outsourcing is always to have continuity in that candidate and client experience. As soon as that process breaks, then your candidates you're gonna feel that, and you're gonna get that feedback from your candidate and your clients. And so, really having more of an insourcing versus an outsourcing mindset, I think, is going to alleviate a lot of those potential challenges. And again, it's not going to come without its headaches and its heartaches, but the more time that's invested in really training that process and going through the sales pitch of your business for your new outsourced recruiters and giving them the nuts and bolts of every client that you support before you even implement and deploy the recruiters in the market, that time spent initially is going to really pay dividends 3 to 6, X amount of years going forward. And what's nice is that as the outsourcing provider learns all these things and they are integrated into the business, that's less time that you have to spend training new people if there's turnover. Then the outsourcing provider, IMS, for example, we actually then perform on-the-job training and process training ourselves because we know that our client's business so well. So that doesn't pull your internal training team. That doesn't pull your recruiting or account managers as new staff are added. That kind of business as usual continues to flow. And that's also, again, keeping your teams focused on what's going to drive your business profitability and relationships, and not more the mundane back office and training things that really become a burden and a suck of your internal resources. Number 3, again, is like we've talked about, leveraging outsourcing to focus on kind of core business and revenue producing functions. This is just a small list of some of the things that IMS and many outsource providers do on behalf of staffing firms, but certainly not limited. Marketing services. Again, there is such a focus on branding and engaging candidates in the market right now. Most candidates make 7 to 9 different trips to either a website or to social media before they even submit their resume or make a buying decision as a candidate. And so having your brand out there is very critical. But I know right now we're all going so fast and furious that marketing may not even be a big part of what you all do as a staffing firm. And so if it's not, IMS and other companies, in the outsourcing space can certainly support that. And while sales may not be the biggest focus right now, utilizing a very regimented schematics, lead generation, and inside sales support process can be a great way for you to keep your internal sales staff really focused on engaging just on meetings and going out and kissing babies and shaking hands. And the outsourcing provider can be pushing out messaging automatically, responding to initial inbound inquiries, engaging candidates that may be dormant in your database. All those things can really impact your business as your sales staff continues to cultivate relationships locally. Certainly, if I think about kind of the conundrum of MSP VMS recruiting right now, which is continuing to become more and more pervasive as technology improves, a lot of enterprise organizations, $500 million and above, are leveraging technologies rather than engaging directly with their contingent workforce partners. And so it becomes, again, a race between quality, speed, and pricing. And candidly, most of those, quality is the third on the totem pole there. And so I think leveraging an outsourcing group that can focus either on those low margin and or high volume businesses where you've got a lot of competition is a great way to initially start an outsourcing relationship. Doesn't mean it's just handing them the keys and moving on, but it's, again, giving them the tools to be successful in this program. And then you really determining, okay, is this MSP VMS program something that I can make profitable in the short and the long term? Or potentially, is it something that I can re-engage my local staff on if it appears to be something that's more viable now that there's getting support? So again, if you're only submitting against 70% of your requisitions, but you can get that extra coverage of 30% with only 10% additional cost, that can be really impactful to your business and also create more adoption with your local staff to perpetuate that type of strategy and really grow your business. IMS and other providers also provide VMS coordination, administrative onboarding support. So again, as a lot of these processes become more automated or technology centric, that becomes much more of a manual kind of task for your recruiters and account managers to facilitate that, again, may not be the best uses of their time. And so outsourcing providers can oftentimes man those, communicate back and forth effectively with the MSP and the pre-screening, credentialing providers that you're partnering with to put your people to work. And just another function that can keep your office humming while you're engaging with your clients. We've seen a huge uptick, obviously, with the pandemic, the last 18, 24 months or so with healthcare worker credentialing. Right now, the war for nursing and physician talent is so incredible, that, again, not only identifying resources and candidates that want to do the work, but then getting them credentialed so that they can actually go on site and become billable is a huge task. And we've seen with a lot of our clients, our ability to really find and obtain all that credentialing information, audit it, and get it to market for our clients, one, frees up our clients, healthcare recruiters, and keeps them focusing on engaging with candidates and building relationships, but two, is able to really shorten and siphon that time to fill so that you can not only gain the opportunity, but get revenue producing quicker from a billing standpoint. And then lastly, the opportunity to continue to engage in more of a total workforce solution environment is going to be critical as you go forward. Number two is, I say, the gamification of anything and everything, particularly with the cultures in India and the Philippines, which I've primarily leveraged in my career. Everything is about gamification and competition, and not even from a monetary standpoint. A lot of it is just centered around awards, recognition. And so I kind of craft this as, make recruiting fun again. It's not an easy job, and it's one that becomes a tireless effort. And so I think the more that you can keep recruiters on their toes, your salespeople on their toes, and making it fun, the better. And I know a lot of outsourcing providers already have their own internal kind of gamification mechanisms that are wonderful. And I encourage you to ask about them as you're going through your vetting process or as you continue relationships with outsourcing providers. But we try to customize it to our customers too. I used to do like a recruiting bingo every month, and we would change the parameters of the bingo sheet. And so that was something that was fun. We would do a recruiter of the month, and we would actually send them or give them a picture of a big check, like in Happy Gilmore with their name on it. So again, there's just things that the team can focus on and have fun with that each and every day, because recruiting isn't easy, but it can still be fun. A lot of this is about having daily engagement, focusing on specific goals and completion. And again, not so much on very long-term forward-looking initiatives. So I don't typically recommend a daily SLA in terms of submissions, but maybe it's around number of calls or engagement with the candidates, whatever you feel is appropriate for your business. But having weekly submittal goals is pretty common within our client base. And also having margin goals every month or every quarter is certainly something that we see. It could be number of resumes, sourced if it's more of a non-voice sourcing activity. So again, having certain daily goals, even if it's not your down funnel output that the team can focus on and gamificate that is critical. I would make it visual as you have daily goals, weekly, monthly. I always kind of think of it like a charity drive, right? Where every time money's, achieved or submittal activity is achieved, that kind of goes up the thermometer. That's something I've seen really work. And the more you can make it visual within your internal and your outsourcing provider teams, then that can really galvanize them, and everyone's talking about it, everybody's messaging on it. You can do an award ceremony every month, quick 5-10 minutes, that can really mean a lot to everybody. But I also think there's an opportunity to have a career path within your outsourcing partnership. To be very candid, some of the challenges that I've had with outsourcing partners, IMS included over the years, is that I would have a great recruiter or resource that eventually did so well that they got promoted within, the outsourcing organization, but they left the team. And so I think establishing a career path that they can grow within your organization as they hit certain milestones, certain number of hires, a certain number of amount of margin, whatever it is, having that very transparent, giving them the lay of the land and that runway as you start can really help retain them within your organization, but also, have that continuity that I found to be really important for a long-term successful outsourcing partnership. As I mentioned, the awards and recognition, they mean the world, to these resources across the globe. I'll never forget my first award ceremony with IMS, where 1,000 people were on a video call. And a lot of them dispersed throughout, the country and the world because of the COVID pandemic, but to see the faces of pride when they got an award, and we may not even think it'd be that important or significant, but that achievement and that acknowledgement from their local peers and their leadership really does mean the world. So I think anytime you can show that acknowledgement and thank them for what they're doing on behalf of your business is really going to help build that trust and relationship going forward. And then lastly, if there's a takeaway here, if there's anything we've learned the last 24 months, is humanize all that you do. And while an outsourcing partnership may not feel exactly like hiring somebody internally within your organization, I find the clients that we have, the experience that I've had as a customer, the more that I treated them like anybody else, like they were my employee, like they were, they are a human. They are a person, and they're not just, a statistic or a KPI benchmark. But the more that you can integrate them into your life and into your company, and treating them like the people that they are, I think you're really going to get a lot back from them. You're going to build that trust, and it's only going to help improve the partnership. And these last couple of years have been really tough, but if there's any takeaway, and just maybe this might have been all worth it if we all think about this a little bit more as we go forward. So hopefully this has helped be an informative, last 40 minutes or so of a topic. I encourage you all to come by the IMS Group booth and learn about our recruitment, our kind of middle office and back office accounting services that we provide. I'm more than happy to conduct sessions directly or schedule something throughout the week. But before we jump off, I do know there's some questions that have come up on the chat, so I'm going to kind of run through those here really quick. One of them is to partner with IMS. Is there a minimum number of requisitions to take it on? Does the requisition need to be equal or more than a certain value? Now, again, I can speak on behalf of IMS just briefly, but I would say overall, that's a great question to ask the provider. We see typically 3 to 5 requisitions per week, per recruiter. But that's not a hard and fast rule. I think that's where understanding the types of skill sets, what your expectations are of your internal recruiters, and how that could compare to the outsourcing staff. But I think the best outsourcing providers are going to ask some more questions of you and that question to be able to best answer that. But overall, what you'll want to align on is, okay, if I have X number of recruiters, how many requisitions is appropriate for me to send out during the week? And, is there a certain minimum value or minimum pay rate, that is attributed to that? And when I am asked, really no, but at the same time, every outsourcing provider may have a slightly different threshold or rules of engagement. So it's just important to understand that as you go through the partnership. But more than happy to answer those questions more specific to your business post the session. And then Mahima asked that they're now IT and healthcare specialized firms supporting clients with IT staffing services. So again, I think more of a marketing promotion there versus a specific question. But overall, again, find out what type of business the outsourcing provider really specializes in. Try to get them to share some raw data and some tangible evidence of that success. Gaining references from other companies that have explored it, whether it's IT or healthcare. That's going to be critical as you evaluate that potential partner as well. So those are the main questions that came up. You've got a couple more minutes here. If you wanted to ask any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But otherwise, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me for the last 45 or odd minutes or so in outsourcing. Obviously, you can tell that I drank the Kool-Aid and gained a lot from it over the years, and would love to talk shop with you throughout the week and share more about my IMS successes and what we're doing for our client. So with that, I will give you 15 minutes back for your day so you can check some email as you get into the break, and look forward to networking with you all throughout the week. Thanks so much.